My parents sold my grandmother's century-old heirloom piano, the very one she'd promised to me in front of the entire family, and they used every cent of the $95,000 to buy my younger sister a luxury SUV while my grandmother lay dying in a hospice bed. They were certain she was too medicated to ever find out, and they were equally certain I'd never have the nerve to tell her. They were wrong on both counts. When I finally told my grandmother the truth from her hospital bed, she didn't weep, she didn't look surprised, and she didn't raise her voice. She simply picked up her phone, made a single call, and spoke 7 words that would dismantle my parents' entire world. Before I tell you exactly what those 7 words were, or how the revelation unfolded at my mother's 60th birthday celebration, I want you to know that this story is about truth, consequence, and the surprising power of a dying woman's last lesson. If you appreciate stories with heart, please take a moment to hit like and subscribe to Winds of Thought. Drop a comment below and tell me what time it is where you're watching from and what you think of this story's opening. Silence is a language the broken learn too well. Now, let's go back to the exact moment my world tilted on its axis. It was a damp Tuesday afternoon, and I had just finished my final piano lesson of the day with a 7-year-old who couldn't keep his fingers off the wrong keys. The call from my father came with no greeting, no concern. My name is Clara Bennett, and I'm a 29-year-old music teacher. Your grandmother had another heart attack, he stated, his voice devoid of any warmth. She's stable, but they're moving her to hospice care. Family meeting at the hospital, 1 hour. I didn't hesitate. I threw my sheet music into my bag and drove straight to the hospital, my heart pounding against my ribs. When I arrived, I found the 3 of them huddled in a corner of the waiting room like conspirators. My father, Robert Bennett, stood rigidly with his arms folded, a man who measured success in square footage and stock portfolios. My mother, Patricia, clutched her designer handbag as if it were the only thing keeping her tethered to the earth. And my younger sister, Leah, 4 years my junior and the undisputed golden child, was glued to her phone, scrolling through social media with complete disinterest in the medical crisis unfolding behind the double doors. "Good, you're here," my father declared, launching into a logistical plan. "We need to divide responsibilities. Patricia and I have the business to run. Leah is in a critical phase with her boyfriend's family. Leah is dating Daniel Miller, the son of my father's most important business associate. So, Clara," he said, his gaze settling on me like an assignment, "you'll handle the daily visits. Your schedule is flexible, and it's not like teaching music is a real job anyway." I had 37 students that week, plus an after-school program, but I knew better than to argue. Of course, I murmured, feeling the familiar weight of being the one who always gets the short end of the stick. I want to be with her anyway. As I turned to walk toward my grandmother's room, I heard my mother's voice drift down the hallway, intended for Leah's ears but landing squarely in mine. "At least she's useful for something." I kept walking. I didn't flinch. I was so accustomed to this kind of casual cruelty that I'd stopped expecting any different. But that moment, something inside me shifted. A tiny hairline crack in the surface of my patience. Grandma Eleanor's hospital room smelled of lavender sachets and old leather-bound books. "They want to make everything smell like a morgue," she had told me on my first visit. I refuse. I'm going out surrounded by the things I love. She was 78, with the sharp mind of a chess grandmaster and a failing heart that was slowly losing the battle. The doctors had given her weeks, perhaps a month at most. I visited her every single day after school. We'd talk about music, about her performances in Boston and New York, about my students who were just beginning to find their rhythm. One evening, as dusk settled over the city, she grabbed my hand with surprising strength. "Clara, I need you to know something very important. Anything, "Grandma, the Steinway," she said, her voice raspy but firm. "The one from 1892. It belongs to you. I've already told Robert and Patricia." I remembered that conversation. It had been at a family dinner months ago, and my father's jaw had tightened while my mother exchanged a knowing look with Leah. My sister had rolled her eyes and called it sentimental junk, but my grandmother was adamant. "You're the only one who understands the soul of it. Promise me you'll cherish it." "I promise, Grandma." She smiled, a knowing smile that seemed to suggest she could see the future. "There are some things worth more than money, my dear, and some people need to learn that lesson the hard way." 2 weeks later, everything changed. Grandma had asked me to retrieve some old photographs from her house, pictures from her concert days that she wanted to see one last time. I still had a key, so I drove over on a rainy Thursday evening. The house was eerily quiet. I walked through the foyer, past the dining room, and stepped into the living room where the antique Steinway had stood for over 30 years. The space was completely empty. There was nothing but a rectangular depression in the carpet, a ghostly outline of something that had been violently ripped away. I couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and called my mother. "Mom, where is Grandma's piano?" A pause, then her dismissive voice. "Your father handled it. Don't worry about it." "Handled it how? Where is it?" I said, "Don't worry about it, Clara." Click, she hung up on me. I stood there in the deafening silence, staring at the indentation in the carpet. Rain hammered against the windows, and thunder rolled in the distance. I drove to my parents' house that evening, my mind racing with 1,000 terrible possibilities. My father opened the door, a glass of scotch in his hand, looking annoyed at my intrusion. "The piano," I demanded. "What did you do?" "Sold it," he said, taking a sip of his drink. "Got 95,000 for it. It was a good deal." The world spun around me. "You sold it?" "Grandma said it was mine." "Grandma's dying, Clara. She doesn't need a piano, and neither do you." Behind him, I heard the jingle of car keys, and Leah appeared in the hallway, beaming. "New car, new keys." She chirped. "You bought her a car?" I could barely form the words. "With Grandma's piano?" My father shrugged. "Leah needs to make the right impression with the Millers. They're particular about appearances. That piano was supposed to be mine." I shouted, my voice cracking. "And what would you do with it?" My mother appeared, arms crossed, her voice dripping with condescension. "You teach children's music classes, Clara. You don't perform. You don't have the space." Leah needed that money for her future. Leah twirled her new keys. "Don't be jealous, sis. It's not a good look." I looked at them, at this family that had always treated me like an afterthought, and a cold fury settled into my bones. "Does Grandma know?" The silence was deafening. "Does she know you sold her piano?" My mother's face hardened. "She's in hospice, Clara. She's on morphine. She doesn't need to know anything that might upset her." "You mean you don't want her to know?" My mother stepped closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "If you tell her and it causes a shock, you will be responsible for killing your grandmother. Do you want that on your conscience?" The accusation hung in the air, toxic and manipulative. The old Clara would have backed down, but something in me had finally snapped. "Grandma has a right to know what happened to her property," I said quietly, my voice trembling but resolute, "and I won't lie to her." I turned and walked out before they could say another word. I didn't sleep that night. My small apartment felt even smaller, a cramped one-bedroom that my parents constantly mocked as proof of my poor life choices. I sat on my thrift store sofa, staring at a framed photo of my grandmother at her final concert, her fingers poised over the keys of that stolen Steinway. Her face was luminous, full of purpose. I thought about my mother's threat. Was she right? Would telling my grandmother the truth actually kill her? But then I remembered something Grandma had told me when I was a child. Truth can hurt, she had said, but lies always hurt deeper. They just take longer. I curled up on the sofa and thought about the last 29 years of my life. Every time I'd stayed quiet to keep the peace. Every time I'd accepted less because fighting felt futile. Every time I'd shrunk myself so my family could feel bigger. And where had it gotten me? Nowhere, alone, invisible. By 3 a.m, I had made my decision. Grandma deserved the truth. She deserved to know that her son had stolen from her, lied to her, and assumed she was too weak to matter. I set my alarm for dawn. Grandma was awake when I arrived at the hospice, propped up against her pillows, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. "You look like you haven't slept," she said softly. "I haven't." I pulled a chair close to her bed and took her hand. "Grandma, I have to tell you something, and it's going to hurt." Her eyes, still sharp despite everything, studied my face. "Then tell me." So I did. I told her about the empty space in her living room, the $95,000, the Mercedes, my father's casual dismissal, my mother's threat, and my sister's taunting. I braced myself for tears, for shock, for a heart attack that would prove my parents right. But instead, my grandmother let out a long, slow breath. It wasn't a gasp of pain. It was a sigh of resigned acknowledgement. "I knew," she whispered. "You knew. I know my son, Clara. I have watched him become this person for 40 years. I hoped he would change, but I also prepared for the possibility that he wouldn't." Prepared how? She didn't answer directly. Instead, she reached for her bedside table. "Hand me my phone, sweetheart." I passed it to her, utterly confused. She scrolled through her contacts with surprising dexterity, found a name and pressed the call button. Then she put it on speaker. 3 rings. Then a man's voice, deep and measured. "Eleanor, how are you feeling?" "I'm dying, Harold, but I'm clear-headed, and it's time." A pause. "I understand. When?" "Sunday, Patricia's birthday party. At my house. I'll prepare the documents." "Thank you, old friend." She ended the call and looked at me with a small, knowing smile. "Grandma," I stammered, "who is Harold?" "Harold Jennings," she said calmly. "He has been my attorney for 30 years. He was your grandfather's closest friend. You have your own attorney?" "I have many things your father doesn't know about, Clara." Her eyes twinkled despite the exhaustion etched into her face. "Richard assumes he understands everything about my affairs. He's always assumed that, and it's his greatest weakness." I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down into a chasm I couldn't see the bottom of. "What's happening on Sunday at Mom's birthday party?" "Justice," my grandmother said, squeezing my hand. "Delayed, perhaps, but justice nonetheless." "I don't understand." "You don't need to understand everything yet. I just need you to do one thing for me. Anything. Come to the party, dress nicely, and bring your patience." She smiled weakly. "The kind of patience I taught you when you were learning Chopin and wanted to throw the sheet music across the room." I almost laughed, despite everything. "That bad?" "Worse," her expression softened. "But necessary. Your parents need to learn that actions have consequences. And I've spent 5 years making sure that when the lesson finally comes, it will be unforgettable." 5 years? "I protected you, Clara, the way I should have protected you all along. I'm only sorry it took me so long." 2 days later, I found myself in Harold Jennings's small law office in the outskirts of Philadelphia. He was a silver-haired man with gold-rimmed glasses, his office lined with leather-bound law books that smelled of old paper and wisdom. "Clara Bennett," he said, extending his hand. "Your grandmother speaks of you constantly." "Mr. Jennings, I, Harold, please," he gestured to a chair. Your grandmother asked me to explain a few things before Sunday. He pulled a folder from his drawer and slid it across the desk. Tell me, Clara, who do you think owns the house your parents live in? They do. Grandma gave it to them when Grandpa died. Is that what they told you? It's what everyone says. Everyone is wrong. He opened the folder to reveal a property deed. Eleanor Whitmore's name, clear as day. She never transferred ownership. Not legally, not ever. I stared at the document, my mind reeling. They've been living in her house for 10 years, thinking it was theirs. Precisely. But why would Grandma let them believe that? Because she was watching Clara. She wanted to see if her son would prove her fears wrong. Unfortunately, he did exactly what she expected. That night, I went home and began searching through an old box of Grandma's belongings. I found it near the bottom, a sealed envelope yellowed with age, my name written in her elegant script. Inside was a photograph of a legal document with a note attached. The house never left my hands, sweetheart. It was only borrowed, and some borrowers don't deserve the privilege. I read it 3 times. Then I understood. Sunday's party was being held at Grandma's house, the same house my parents had treated as their own for a decade. They had decorated it, remodeled it, and sold the piano that sat in the living room, all while pretending they owned it. But they didn't. It had never been theirs. My father's entire identity was built on a foundation that didn't exist. He had spent years lecturing me about real assets, all while standing in a borrowed home. The irony was almost too perfect. I tucked the letter back into its envelope and set it on my nightstand. Sunday was 3 days away. The night before the party, Grandma called me. Her voice was weaker, and I could hear the effort each word cost her. But her mind was as sharp as ever. Clara, are you ready for tomorrow? I think so. It's your mother's birthday in front of all those people. That's why it needs to be tomorrow. Your father sold my piano in front of everyone. He announced it at that family dinner last month like it was his decision to make. I remember. Then you understand why the lesson needs witnesses. I'm not doing this for revenge, sweetheart. Revenge is empty. I'm doing this because it's right and because you deserve to be protected, especially after I'm gone. Tears burned behind my eyes. Grandma, I should have acted sooner. That was my mistake. Love made me blind for too long. But I can still make it right. Do you trust me, Clara? Always. Then come tomorrow. Wear something that makes you feel strong. And no matter what happens, remember, you are not the villain in this story. You never were. Sunday arrived with pale winter sunlight. Grandma's house, my parents' borrowed house, looked festive. A banner reading "Happy 60th Birthday, Patricia" hung across the porch. Cars lined the driveway. I parked at the far end and sat in my car for a moment, gathering myself. I had worn a simple navy dress and pearl earrings, armor for a battle I didn't fully understand. Inside, the house buzzed with about 30 guests, aunts, uncles, neighbors, and my father's business associates. The living room drew my eye immediately. The empty corner where the Steinway had stood was now occupied by a large potted plant. It looked ridiculous, like a leafy apology for something that couldn't be apologized away. My mother held court in a red dress, accepting compliments. My father worked the room with practiced charm, and in the far corner, almost invisible, sat Harold Jennings, his briefcase on his lap. He caught my eye and gave an almost imperceptible nod. I nodded back. My Aunt Margaret, Grandma's younger sister, appeared beside me. "Clara, sweetheart, how is Eleanor really?" "Tired," I said, "but still sharp. She always was the smart one." My aunt's eyes drifted to the empty corner. I noticed the piano's gone. Richard said Eleanor wanted to sell it. Before I could respond, my father's voice cut through the chatter. "Everyone, if I could have your attention." My father stood in the center of the living room, a crystal glass raised. Today, we celebrate 60 wonderful years of Patricia Bennett. Applause, my mother beamed. And I also want to share some exciting family news. My stomach dropped. As some of you know, our daughter Leah has been seeing Daniel Miller. He gestured toward Daniel, who smiled politely. And to celebrate her bright future, we have a special surprise. He led the entire party outside, where a gleaming red Mercedes sat in the driveway, a red bow on its hood. A gift, my father announced, made possible by Grandma Eleanor's generosity. She sold her antique piano to invest in her granddaughter's future. Leah squealed and threw her arms around my father. Cameras flashed. I stood frozen on the porch, my blood turning to ice. He was rewriting history, erasing Grandma's wishes entirely. I heard whispers behind me. Wasn't that piano supposed to go to the other granddaughter? Before I could answer, Leah spotted me. Clara, come take a picture. Don't be jealous. I'm sure Grandma will leave you something too. Maybe her old sheet music. Scattered laughter. My hands were shaking, my vision blurred with tears I refused to shed. And then, behind me, I heard the click of a briefcase opening. Everyone began filing back inside, but Aunt Margaret blocked my father's path. Richard, I need to ask you something. Can it wait, Margaret? We're in the middle of, did you ask Eleanor before you sold that piano? The question landed like a stone in still water. Conversation stuttered to a halt. Mother is in hospice, my father said smoothly. She's not in a condition to make decisions. We did what was best. I spoke with her this morning, Margaret said, her voice growing stronger. She's clear-headed, Richard, completely lucid. And she told me you never asked her permission. You never even told her. More people were listening now. I saw Mr. Miller frown. My mother pushed forward. Margaret, this is my birthday. Let's not make a scene. A scene? Margaret laughed, but it was hollow. Patricia, your husband sold Eleanor's most precious possession without her knowledge and used the money for a car. If anyone is making a scene, it's not me. The room had gone quiet. 30 pairs of eyes ping-ponged between my aunt and my parents. My father's composure cracked. This is a family matter. It doesn't need to be discussed in public. Actually, a new voice said, I think public is exactly where it needs to be discussed. I turned. Harold Jennings was standing, his briefcase open, a folder of documents in his hand. He walked toward the center of the room with the calm authority of a man who had done this 1,000 times. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Harold Jennings. I'm Eleanor Whitmore's attorney. My father's face went white. The silence was suffocating. I apologize for interrupting the celebration, Harold said, his voice carrying easily across the room. But Eleanor Whitmore has asked me to address some urgent matters regarding her estate. Given the circumstances, she felt it was important that her family and those close to them hear this directly. My father found his voice. My mother has an attorney? Since when? Since 30 years ago, Richard, I also represented your father. You would know this if you'd ever bothered to ask. My mother stepped forward. Eleanor is dying. She's not in her right mind. Whatever papers you have, Mrs. Bennett, Harold raised a hand, silencing her. I visited Eleanor this morning. Her nurse can confirm she is fully competent and lucid. She dictated specific instructions for today's meeting. He pulled out a document. Now, I understand there's been some confusion about property ownership. Let me clarify. He held up the paper. This is the deed to the house we are currently standing in. I watched my father's face drain of color. Notice the name on the deed. Eleanor Whitmore, not Richard Bennett, not Patricia Bennett. He paused. This house has never been transferred. It was never gifted. Your parents have been living here rent-free for 10 years at Eleanor's generosity. Nothing more. The room erupted in whispers. My father grabbed the edge of a chair to steady himself. Leah stared at her father, confusion and panic warring on her face. And Harold wasn't done. That, he said quietly, is just the beginning. This is impossible, my father's voice cracked. Mother said the house was ours. She promised you could live here. She never promised ownership. There's a significant legal difference, Mr. Bennett. I watched the realization spread through the room like wildfire. Mr. Miller took a small step back from my father. A neighbor exchanged a knowing glance with her husband. For 10 years, Harold continued, you've enjoyed this property without paying rent, utilities, or property taxes, all covered by Eleanor's accounts. You've treated it as your own. You've even made modifications without permission. Legally, you are tenants at will, and the property owner has the right to terminate that arrangement at any time. You can't be serious. My mother's voice was shrill. We've lived here for a decade. Without authorization, Harold's expression didn't change. Any improvements you've made without written consent belong to the property owner, Eleanor Whitmore. Leah grabbed Daniel's arm. This is insane. My father couldn't speak. He was staring at the deed like it was a death warrant. I should also mention, Harold added almost casually, that Pennsylvania law takes property fraud quite seriously. Representing someone else's property as your own, particularly in business contexts, can have significant legal consequences. I saw Mr. Miller's expression shift from confusion to cold calculation. He was looking at my father differently now. Not as a partner, but as a liability. And Harold still had more documents in his folder. Now, he said, pulling out a second document, we come to the matter of the trust. What trust? My father's voice was barely above a whisper. 5 years ago, Eleanor Whitmore established a separate trust independent of the will. This trust was created specifically to protect her most valuable assets in the event of, he paused, financial misconduct. Financial misconduct? My mother sputtered. We're her family. Family members can still commit misconduct, Mrs. Bennett, as recent events have demonstrated. Harold withdrew a thick document. Per the terms of this trust, the following assets are irrevocably assigned to a single beneficiary: the property we're standing in, Eleanor's financial accounts, and all items of sentimental value, including the 1892 Steinway piano that was recently sold without authorization. He looked up, and his gaze settled directly on me. The sole beneficiary is Clara Rose Bennett. The room went completely still. Then Leah's shriek broke the silence. What? This is fraud. My father shouted. She was manipulated. That little, he pointed at me, his face contorted with rage. Richard, Harold's voice turned to ice. I would advise you to choose your next words very carefully. Everything said here today has been witnessed by over 30 people. Aunt Margaret moved to stand beside me. Her hand found mine and squeezed. Eleanor knew exactly what she was doing, Margaret said. She spent 5 years watching, waiting, hoping her son would prove her wrong. Instead, he sold her most treasured possession to buy a car for the granddaughter who never visits her. She paused. Actions have consequences, Mr. Bennett. This is yours. My mother was crying now. Leah looked like she might be sick. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't believe what I was hearing. Harold let the chaos settle for a moment before continuing. Regarding the piano sale, he pulled out another document. Since the Steinway was part of the trust and Clara is the designated beneficiary, the sale conducted without the trustee's consent, that's Eleanor, constitutes unauthorized disposal of trust assets. What does that mean? Leah's voice was small. It means the $95,000 must be returned to the trust within 30 days. Failure to comply will result in civil litigation for misappropriation of trust property. Given the clear paper trail, I assure you the outcome would not be favorable for your family." My father laughed, a hollow, desperate sound. "We don't have $95,000 sitting around. The money went to the car. Then I suggest you find a way to liquidate that asset." Harold nodded toward the window where the Mercedes was still visible. "The dealer might accept a return, though you'll likely take a significant loss." Leah burst into tears. "My car? You're taking my car?" "I'm not taking anything, Miss Bennett. I'm simply explaining the legal consequences of your family's choices." I watched Leah look to Daniel for support, but he had already stepped away from her, his expression carefully neutral. His father was whispering something in his ear, and neither of them looked sympathetic. "Additionally," Harold added, "Eleanor has asked me to inform you that your living arrangement in this house will be formally restructured. You may continue to reside here temporarily, but a proper lease agreement will be required." "A lease?" My mother's voice was barely audible. "In the house we've lived in for 10 years. In the house," Harold corrected gently, "that you never owned." My father turned to me slowly, his face a mask of betrayal and fury. "You did this. You poisoned her against us." I stood my ground, my voice steadier than I expected. "No, Dad, I didn't do anything. Grandma made these decisions 5 years ago, before I knew anything about them. I only found out this week." "Liar." My mother's voice shook with venom. "You've always been jealous of Leah. This is your revenge." "Revenge?" I felt something cold and hard crystallize inside me. I didn't sell Grandma's piano without asking her. I didn't spend the money on a car for myself. I didn't lie to everyone about what happened. I stepped forward, looking directly at my mother. I'm not the one who said, "At least she's useful for something," when I agreed to visit Grandma every day. I'm not the one who hung up on me when I asked questions, and I'm not the one who threatened me, saying I'd be responsible for killing Grandma if I told her the truth. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Aunt Margaret's hand tightened on mine. "I spent 29 years being invisible in this family," I said, my voice unwavering. "I accepted it because I thought that's what love required. Shrinking yourself to make others comfortable. But Grandma taught me something different. She taught me that loving yourself means standing up for what's right, even when it costs you everything." I took a breath. "So here's what I want you to understand. I'm not apologizing anymore. I'm not staying silent anymore. And I'm done pretending everything is fine when it isn't." After the crowd began to disperse slowly, awkwardly, Harold pulled me aside. "Clara, we need to discuss next steps." I nodded, still feeling surreal. "Legally, you have several options. You could demand immediate eviction. Given the circumstances, your grandmother would support whatever you decide." I looked across the room at my parents. My father had collapsed into a chair, head in his hands. My mother stood frozen by the window, mascara streaked down her face. Leah had disappeared, probably outside mourning her car. They looked broken. "I don't want to throw them out," I said slowly. "Not immediately." Harold raised an eyebrow. "Are you certain?" "Yes, here's what I want. The $95,000 gets returned within 90 days, not 30. They can stay in the house with a formal lease agreement at minimal rent. After Grandma," I swallowed hard, "after she passes, they'll have 12 months to find somewhere else to live. That's remarkably generous given everything." "Maybe," I met his eyes, "but I'm not doing this to punish them. I'm doing this because it's right, and because I refuse to become the kind of person they are." Harold studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Your grandmother said you'd respond this way. She's very proud of you, Clara, I know." My voice cracked. "I know she is." The agreement was drafted right there on the dining room table, witnessed by Aunt Margaret and 2 remaining guests. My father signed without looking at me. My mother's hand shook so badly she could barely hold the pen. Neither of them said a word. By the time the last signature was in place, the house had emptied. Mr. Miller and Daniel had left without saying goodbye. I later learned Daniel had driven away while Leah was still outside crying. The birthday cake sat untouched. The banner drooped sadly over the front porch. Aunt Margaret hugged me tight before leaving. "You did the right thing, sweetheart. Eleanor would be so proud." "She is proud," I said softly. I talked to her this morning. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. A video call request from Grandma's hospice number. I answered, walking to the empty corner of the living room where the piano used to be. Her face appeared on screen, pale but peaceful. "My brave girl," Grandma's voice was weak but warm. "How do you feel?" "Terrified," I admitted, "and relieved and sad all at once. That's how courage feels, sweetheart. It's never comfortable. I didn't throw them out. I gave them time." "I know." Harold texted me. Her eyes glistened. "You're a better person than they deserve, Clara, but that's why I chose you." I pressed my hand against the screen, wishing I could hold her hand. "Thank you, Grandma, for everything." "Don't thank me," she smiled, tinged with sorrow. "Just live well, play music, be happy. That's how you thank me." The first week after the party was chaos. News spread fast. My father's business partners suddenly became unavailable. Old friends stopped returning calls. Mr. Miller formally withdrew from the joint venture they'd been planning. "I can't do business with someone I can't trust," was the cold response. The deal would have been worth over $200,000. Gone, Leah had to return the Mercedes. The dealership only offered $80,000, $15,000 less than my parents had paid. She screamed at the salesman for 20 minutes before finally signing the paperwork. Daniel broke up with her 3 days later via text message. "My family thinks it's best if we take some time apart." Translation, they wanted nothing to do with the Bennett family drama. My sister, who had always been the golden child, found herself suddenly ordinary. No car, no wealthy boyfriend. She had to borrow my mother's old Honda. I didn't gloat. I simply went about my life, teaching piano, visiting Grandma every evening. 3 weeks after the birthday party, the hospice called me at 6 in the morning. "You should come now," the nurse said gently. "She's asking for you." I drove faster than I should have. Grandma's room was quiet. The morning light filtered through the curtains. Her breathing was shallow, her face paper thin, but her eyes were open. "Clara," her voice was barely a whisper. "Come sit with me." I took her hand. It felt so fragile. "I have something to tell you," she said slowly. "Something I should have said years ago. I'm sorry." "Sorry for what?" "For not acting sooner. I watched how they treated you. I kept hoping Richard would change. I made excuses because I didn't want to believe my own son could be so cruel." "It's not your fault," I said, my own tears falling. "Maybe not entirely, but I could have done more. You deserved better." "You gave me everything that mattered," I said fiercely. "Music, love, the knowledge that I was worth something." She smiled. "I'm so proud of you, Clara. You have a good heart, but you finally learned to guard it. You taught me that. Then I did something right." Her eyes fluttered closed. "I'm tired now, sweetheart. Stay with me." Grandma Eleanor passed away that evening, peacefully, with my hand in hers. The funeral was held 5 days later. I played the piano during the service, a modest upright that the church owned. I played Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, the first piece Grandma ever taught me. The church was half full. Aunt Margaret sat in the front row. Grandma's friends filled several pews. My parents sat in the back. They didn't approach me. My mother wore dark sunglasses. My father stared straight ahead. Leah wasn't there at all. Too emotionally fragile, my mother explained. I delivered the eulogy, speaking of Grandma's music, her wisdom, her quiet strength. I didn't mention the drama. The funeral wasn't the place. After the service, my father started walking toward me. He hesitated, took a step, then stopped when my mother grabbed his arm and pulled him away. He never made it across the room. Maybe he wanted to apologize. I'll never know. 6 months later, I moved into Grandma's house. I used part of the returned money to buy a new piano, a beautiful Yamaha Grand, that filled the corner where Grandma's piano had once stood. A new beginning. I started teaching private lessons on weekends. My parents moved out 2 months after Grandma's death. They didn't wait the full 12 months. They bought a small condo across town. We didn't speak. Not out of anger, just distance. Some gaps are too wide to bridge. But I wasn't bitter. Bitterness is exhausting. In the evenings, I'd sit at the piano and play. Sometimes Chopin, sometimes Bach, sometimes just improvised melodies. Grandma's presence lingered in the smell of lavender, in the creak of the floorboards. She was gone, but she was everywhere. And I was finally free. 8 months after the funeral, my phone rang. Leah, I stared at the screen for 3 rings before answering. Clara, her voice sounded smaller, less certain. Leah, silence stretched between us. I'm not calling to ask for anything. I just wanted to say something. Okay, I've been thinking a lot about everything, about how I acted. I was so angry at first. At you, at Grandma, at everyone. I thought you'd stolen something from me. She took a shaky breath. Now I'm working at a marketing firm, entry level. I ride the bus because I can't afford a car. And I've started going to therapy. I listened. My therapist says I have a lot to unpack about Mom and Dad, about why I thought I deserved everything without earning it. Turns out, being the favorite isn't actually a gift. It's a trap. I'm glad you're working through it, I said. I'm not asking you to forgive me, her voice cracked. I just wanted you to know that I understand now why you did what you did, why Grandma did what she did. Grandma loved you too, Leah. She just couldn't reward behavior that hurt other people. I know. I know that now. We sat in silence for a moment. If you ever want to talk, I said slowly, I'm willing to listen. But trust takes time to rebuild. I understand. We hung up without saying goodbye. Not out of coldness, but because neither of us knew how. Some doors once closed open slowly, but they can still open. It's spring now. A full year since Grandma entered hospice. Tonight I sit at my piano as the sun sets over the garden. The windows are open, and a warm breeze carries the scent of jasmine. I play Grandma's favorite nocturne. The notes drift through the empty house, filling the silence with something softer. I think about everything that has happened. The betrayal, the reveal, the boundaries I never thought I'd have the courage to set. I think about Grandma, her strength, her patience. I think about my parents in their small condo, rebuilding a life that will never be quite what they imagined. About Leah riding the bus, learning for the first time what it means to earn something. I don't hate them. Hate takes too much energy. But I don't need them anymore either. And that's a kind of freedom I never expected to find. The nocturne ends. The final notes hang in the air, then fade into the evening quiet. I look at Grandma's photograph on the piano. I'm doing okay, Grandma, I whisper. I'm more than okay. I close the piano lid, stand, and walk to the window. The stars are just beginning to emerge. I don't have the original piano. I don't have the family I thought I had. But I have myself. I have boundaries. I have a life I built on truth instead of silence. And that is my story. Thank you for staying until the end. If this resonated with you, if you have ever had to stand up for yourself in a family that made you feel invisible, know that you are not alone. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It is how you honor your own worth. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe to Winds of Thought for more stories like this. And don't forget to check the description for more videos I think you'll love.